Hi everyone, thanks for the opportunity to speak today. So, Mika mentioned that there's been a lot of talks about, journeys through what you're doing as web managers within your institutions, and so I thought I would not do a journey type story at all. Also, just to say that the links for my slides are online, so you can get those as well. And so let me just try and get this going. So no more stories, no more journeys. And so I'd like to start with a story of my journey, evolution at IWMW. So many years ago, I was a HTML editor working for a company up in Scotland. So I was doing all the copy and paste stuff. And then I went into learning technology for a number of years. And it was whilst I was working within JISC at various innovation centres that I came in touch with IWMW. I think it was IWMW 2009 in Aberdeen. So I was aware of the event, but it wasn't until I think the following year that I actually came. And because Brian was working at another JISC service, he managed to twist my arms a number of times to do bits and pieces. But one of the things that that came out of my contact with IMW is a lot of stuff that is still going on now, and a big part of my day-to-day stuff, or my hobbies. So if you're familiar with the Twitter archiving stuff, that came out of IWMW 12, I think, or something like that. And there's a blog post on IWMW.org about this. And so it's an event where I keep coming to and doing new stuff that I hadn't planned on doing. And this talk is in that category. So I have a lot to give back to IWMW in terms of who I am. And now I find myself within, having been in innovation, learning technologist, actually as a web manager. So this seems like the fitting event for me to be at. But it is a bit worrying where I might end up in a couple of years, looking a bit like my dad, which is a bit scary. But anyway, so one of the things that IWMW did for me was I started exploring coding more, and as a result of that, started looking at a particular Google product which no one has ever heard of, called Google AppScript. And a couple of years ago, Google asked if I would join their community of Google developer experts. So I'm not a Google employee. Anything I say isn't affiliated to Google. It's all my own opinions, which means I can slag off Google if I want. But as part of that program, it pulls in various products. So you get to share and start talking to other experts with Google products. And there's a dedicated group of analytics experts. So these people are in the community. If you've got a problem, if you can find them, they can help you. And this particular talk is really inspired by one guy called Nico Michelli, who's works out of Philadelphia in the States. And so he deals a lot with setting up Google Analytics for various clients. And so this talk really is, if you can trace it back, the origins are essentially in my being part of the IWMW community. So just to give you a quick overview of what I hope to talk about, it's really a shotgun approach. I'm going to blast you with a lot of things about Google Analytics, and I hope that something sticks with you, something triggers in your mind that you think that this is something that we should be doing within our own organizations. Give you some of the terminology or language that you can go back and do something. But I want to just start at the beginning, because in the beginning it was so much easier. We had lots of static content. you know, we're essentially measuring page views and clicks on links. You know, so it's interesting also to think that you know, around this time as well, IWMW was just kicking off as well. But now the web is so much cooler. We have lots of different ways of making web pages basically turn into applications. That, you know, we can use AJAX calls, so we can do things in the background and push things. You know, you've probably all got some sort of autocomplete plugin on your site. You're no doubt using some of these technologies yourself. But when you start doing that, that obviously makes things a lot more complicated in terms of the page view doesn't really count anymore, because you know, you've got infinite scrolling. There's so many things that you can be doing on a page. So if you want to get some insight into in what people are doing on your sites, you can now no longer rely on page views. You have to start looking at the events. So what are people clicking on? Where are they scrolling? How far are they going down the page? Where are they navigating to from? So there's you know, page views don't really do it anymore. But obviously, as the web has got more complex in terms of how it's set up and delivered, at the same time, analytics and tracking have tried to keep up to the pace with it as well. So I'm sure you're all familiar with Google Analytics. A couple of years ago, I did a survey of UK higher education sites, and I think it was something like 97% had Google Analytics on the homepage. So I'm guessing if I ask you, hands up if you've got Google Analytics. Hands up if you use Google Analytics reporting in your job. Hands up if you're a Google Analytics admin. Okay, so I suppose that is basically everyone. But it's funny. There's something at the end I'll bring in around this. So yes. Oh, I suppose the other thing to mention is we've got Google Analytics, but do we use Google Analytics? It's a whole different thing. So you know, Google Analytics really helps us to understand engagement with our web services. And I like to think Google Analytics is the James Bond of event tracking. It's so clean and elegant and easy to use, but it's it's rugged. It can get out of those issues that you encounter if you know how to do it. So I'm sure you're all familiar with this. So this is the Google Analytics event tracking. So you install your Google Analytics tracking code on your website, and then you can start hitting data into your account. So beyond page views, you're sending events into your Google Analytics account. And there's various ways that you can do this. So how many of you are actually hand coding event tracking into your links, or a couple of you? How many are using jQuery to kind of remove some of the heavy lifting, kind of matching elements? And yeah, so this is a very basic example of just tracking a button click. This is one of the things which is quite interesting. So Google Analytics does not allow you to send personal identifiable information into its tracking database. Out of interest, did you know that? I see nodding heads. So yes, if you do that, you potentially get your whole account shut down, which is not going to be good. I'm sure you'll get quick phone calls from people above you. But did you know this, that you can actually send user IDs into your Google Analytics data? Anyone know that? Is that a win for me? I've taught you something new. So what you can actually do is, you can't send an email address or a screen name into Google Analytics, but you can send a user ID into Google Analytics, and you can actually set this on your page. So this really comes in handy if it's no longer just about the web pages anymore. You can start, if you're doing emailings out to alumni or prospective students, you can give them a custom link that actually ties them to a user ID. So you can send this data into Google Analytics pseudo-anonymously. There is more stuff that you can do in terms of the web interface, in terms of analyzing this. But one of the critical things is you can query this back out of the API. So whilst Google is avoiding the data protection headache, you can have that data protection headache, and you can start making very detailed analysis of individual users and how they're interacting with your site, which is something you might want to consider when you're, instead of your throwaway Google Analytics tracking cookies, blah, blah, blah. If you start using this, you might want to add something else in about, oh, and we know who you are. So I'm just going to touch on this particular area very briefly because it's something I'm interested in. So for your learning and teaching teams, learning analytics is a big thing right now. There's a lot of interest in how we can actually use analytics in terms of improving the learning experience. And you can actually use Google Analytics for that purpose. So within your institutions, you've probably got VLEs that have things like multiple choice quizzes. You can use your Google Analytics event tracking to actually record these. And if you include a user ID, you can actually see who is responding to these questions. So you can have a multiple choice question, and if you know which answers are right and wrong, you can send that data into Google Analytics and query it. And you can do this in real time because of the real-time tracking that you get with Google Analytics. So if your colleagues start coming to you and saying, how can we use our Google Analytics for learning analytics? You probably might want to say, here's the form, fill it in, or you might want to have a conversation with them to see if there's something you can do. So there's a practical element to that. You don't want to go into your VLE and start coding up hundreds, thousands of multiple choice questions. So Google Tag Manager is the potential solution for this. How many of you are using Google Tag Manager? Okay, so it's around half. So for those that of you who don't know, Google Tag Manager, it's similar in the Google Analytics that you include a tracking snippet within your template. Where it's different is that then basically enables you to have a cloud console where you can start creating your own triggers to send event information into your Google Analytics platform. And because it's a web interface, that web interface can be shared with other people so they can contribute on it. And so you can push out new experiments, you can push out new tracking across your domain very easily and very quickly. So if you're not using Google Tags Manager, I think you should seriously be looking at it, because I don't think adding event tags to all your web pages is a particularly scalable thing to do. And I've got the joy of going straight to give a masterclass on Google Analytics, which will include how you can use Google Tags Manager for this sort of thing. And this is just a screenshot from Google Tags Manager. So similar to the click button example, you've got a web interface, so there's a degree of friendliness. And you can go a lot more complex in terms of adding your custom JavaScript into event triggers. So you can do things like put some JavaScript in that will just sniff if the browser is mobile, and so that can then inject a particular tag within the page relevant to a mobile user, or put additional information into your Google Analytics account about the mobile device that they're using that you're not already getting. So there's a lot of scope there, and it's not just using Google Analytics with Google Tag Manager. You can actually start tweaking the underlying web interface. So if you've got a nasty bug within your system and you need a quick fix, Google Tag Manager is the way to do this, because you can start manipulating the page without having to go into all your themes. So, so that was kind of, hopefully you're familiar with that aspect of Google Analytics. Google Analytics also has something called the measurement protocol. Measurement protocol, heard of? No one's heard of? Someone must have heard. Come on, I want one hand. I want one person to lie now. Thank you. Can she have a USB stick? My God, it's like giving a Google App Script talk all over again. So the measurement protocol is quite interesting. It gives you a grassroots way to interact with the Google Analytics data collection. So previously with the other Google Analytics tracking, it was very much about websites and web views. The measurement protocol basically gives you an endpoint where you can hit with event tracking information too. So what that means is similar to the documentation around the kind of universal analytics tracking. It's very similar in terms of you can provide event information, but there's a bit more that you can do as well. So instead of user IDs, we can also include a client ID. So that's useful again for tracking people across devices or platforms or even sessions, which can be useful. And this basically means that anything that has a web connection can potentially be sending data into Google Analytics. So anything from smart TV apps to your library kiosk systems. So, someone's checking a book back in. If you've got a snippet of code in your kiosk interface, then it could be sending something into Google Analytics. Your EPOS, again, could be sending purchases made physically into your Google Analytics e-commerce tracking. And other back-end applications. So any piece of software that can hit an internet, a HTTP URL can potentially be sending data into Google Analytics. So let's look at some examples of what that means in reality. So no tracking, no problem. So I've talked a couple of examples there where traditional Google Analytics tracking on a web page, but what about for services or systems where they're not yours, so you can't include a web tracking piece of code onto that site? Well, here's an experiment I ran where basically I've got a piece of script running in the blue box, and that script talks to the VLE via an API. So it's saying, in this particular case, it was looking for discussion board information. So the script goes to the discussion board and it pulls back various things like, who's posted, how many words did they post, what was that post in reply to. The script can process that, strips out any identity if we need to, but also perhaps including a user ID for us to look at later, and then pushes those counts into Google Analytics. And so we've got a web view of a discussion board. So that obviously relies on your VLE having some sort of API that a script can query and get data back, but it opens up to so many other opportunities. There's a couple of interesting things with this example just to highlight. So this script I'd written in AppScript, which you've never heard of, so it ran every 15 minutes. So that obviously potentially means that your Google Analytics data is going to be like every 15-minute batch. And you perhaps want it down to the second about when did that person post. And in fact, so before I go any further, just kind of So let's see, I'll step back a bit. So we've got a user ID in here. We've got the number of replies that user put onto the thread. We've got a word count, and just as another very quick metric, I just counted the number of question marks in the data. And this was done, even though the script was running every 15 minutes, with the measurement protocol, we can actually include a queue time. So this allows us to run a script every 15 minutes, and if we've got timestamped data from the API, we can actually include that, so we can make that a latent hit. So if someone posted something 14 minutes ago, we can say this hit was 14 minutes ago. Google say there's a 4-hour window that you can go back and reliably put data into the Google Analytics and see it in the web dashboard and the API. But the maximum queue time length can be a lot longer than that. So it doesn't have to be real time anymore. You can be running stuff in batches. So if you've got a device that isn't always on the internet, when it is comes back online, it could be pushing data into Google Analytics. Other thing that you can do with the measurement protocol is send things in batches. Instead of individually hitting 20 times with event information, you can do that in one batch. So it just saves a bit on processing. Something useful to be aware of. So some other examples of how you might use the measurement protocol. Within the traditional Google Analytics, there was always the option to send exceptions into Google Analytics data, which was useful to track errors on your web systems. We can do something similar with the measurement protocol. So here's a quick video. So what this is showing is on the left-hand side, we've got a macro running in Excel, which is going to pull some data or process some data from Excel and push it to an online database. So I think it was a MongoDB database. But what this snippet of code is doing is it's also pinging the Google Analytics API through the measurement protocol with those hits. So it's sending its activity into two places at the same time. So in real time, you can see what's going on. You might wonder, what's the point of doing that? So if I just jump to the next slide. So the way this example was used was actually to see which versions of libraries people were using. As this product evolved, they obviously up-versioned, and they wanted, because the code was being run offline not offline, from the desktop in Excel, he wanted to see how many of his users were upgrading their software. And the big dip in October was when a particular database was taken offline, so it no longer worked, so people had to upgrade to keep on using that particular functionality. And we can do the analytics of things, so extending Internet of Things. This is an example from Nico Michelli of taking a Raspberry Pi and connecting it to a motion sensor. So all he's done is written a script in Raspberry Pi that takes the motion sensor data and then ping the measurement protocol. So you can use, it's not just motion sensors, you can use any array of sensors, and you can be pushing data into Google Analytics. With his particular example, he was looking at his sleeping pattern. So he was sending, he also set this up above his, he just became a father recently, and he set it up above his baby's crib as well. So he was sending his baby's movement into Google Analytics, which, I don't know, it just sounds wrong to me, but Easter. He also set this up at an event at the drinks bar. So you could see people were talking whilst the drinks bar was open, so they could see which talkers got the least interest by the most number of people that went to the drinks bar. And we could do other things. So I said show of hands. Something I was hoping to show you today but didn't quite finish the development was using a Raspberry Pi with a camera. And there's an OpenCV library which basically is able to process images. So it would be able, if I tweaked it enough, to detect perhaps you putting your hands up, and we could push that data into Google Analytics. Or if estates are wanting to do, for example, a survey of stairwell use over the course of the day, again you could be using Google Analytics for this, pushing motion data into to their database, and then using the web view to see. And importantly, there are other Google APIs out there, just if you're thinking about doing even more with Google Analytics. So there are APIs around administering accounts. So instead of having to go into the web interface and start applying view permissions to different people, if you've got a spreadsheet or a database elsewhere, you could write a script that automatically does this. So you might want to provide access to your analytics data for a short window. Instead of going in and manually adding and removing people, you could have a script that does this for you. And I mentioned before the reporting as well. So it's not just the web view that you get, which does give you things like export of data into CSV, but you could be using the API to pull that data back. Out of interest, how many are using Google Analytics reporting not from the web interface, but custom white tops? So a couple of people. So you'll be familiar with this concept. A couple of things to note. This has been made even easier recently within Google Sheets. Google Analytics have created an add-on where you can query the data into Google Sheets, which makes it easy to, if you don't want to give view permissions to your analytics account, you could set up the add-on to pull back certain data and then share a sheet with someone. And this can be set up to schedule, so it can refresh the data. So if you want to give a weekly report or a monthly report, the add-on will let you do that. It needs a bit of poking around in terms of setting up and working out which metrics and dimensions that you need in your reports, but once you've done it, it makes it a lot easier. And this was a project that I actually developed for IWMW 14, I think it was, looking at, this was pre-add-on of creating a script that could just dump data files into Google Drive, or email them to people, or just add them to Google Drive. This is kind of superseded by what Google have done with the super proxy, which is their version of this that runs on the Google Cloud Platform. And just in terms of the future, Google Data Studio, anyone heard of Data Studio? A couple of people. So this is in closed beta right now, so annoyingly it's only available to users in the US, but this is a tool that I think Google have developed more out of the reaction to the wider marketplace with products like Tableau, where it is a lot easier to create custom views on data. Data Studio is similar to Tableau in drag and drop information into a page, and it looks nicer, so you can share it with your VP without wincing at your poor graphs. So it hooks into the Google Analytics API. It also hooks into other data sources, so you can get data in from Google Sheets as well. And I think there are going to be other data sources that you can use, so perhaps something to watch for the future. So that was kind of a whistle-stop tour around what is possible nowadays with the Google Analytics and Google Analytics APIs. Hopefully it's inspired you to go off. If nothing else, experiment a little and have a bit of fun. But do not do any evil, because that'd be bad. So, essentially, hopefully you've got a new perspective on Google Analytics. It's something that we can rethink how we use it within our organizations, and rethink what we are actually asking of the data, and which obviously makes us rethink what data we're collecting as well. And I'll leave it there.